Hi, this is kind of a weird video for this channel, but I figure you guys might like it. We're doing a book review today. I know, kind of crazy. I don't really cover books on this channel, but I figure why not start here? I recently purchased the brand new Godzilla Encyclopedia off of Amazon, and I figured I would give it a review because, frankly, it looked really interesting to me. I'm going to go kind of off the cuff here and just talk while I show you some pages from the book, and that's about it. It's not going to be one of my crazier videos. So this is Godzilla the Encyclopedia by Shinji Nishikawa, and as you can see, a lot of this is just simple illustrations with explanations breaking down what the monsters are, maybe some facts about them, and we also get some little blurbs from the author about their thoughts on the designs and maybe even the movie itself. It goes in chronological order from the Showa era all the way up until the Reiwa era. However, it doesn't really follow the MonsterVerse stuff, which might be a big turnoff for a lot of the American Godzilla fans. However, I still think that for people like me that are more into the Toho stuff, this is pretty damn cool. It also goes into some of the human characters. There's this page in the back that goes over all of the female characters in the Godzilla movies. And this is really neat. I think that for a Godzilla encyclopedia, it's really important to go over the human characters as well as the monsters. We also have some really awesome guides on how to draw Godzilla, and these go from every single era, which is also really fascinating. For someone that isn't really an artist, I like to just enjoy looking at some of these things. I mean, it's neat seeing tutorials like this, especially when they're made by someone who's extremely professional and they know exactly what they're talking about. It's also pretty cool seeing things like Singular Point included, since that series, while flawed, does deserve some more love. I also love the Shin Godzilla drawing that we see here. Getting to see the tail up close is just so awesome. It includes a lot of really important information. For example, if you want to see a specific monster in a specific movie, they have these little guides at the end of every chapter that kind of explains, okay, if you want to see this monster, go to this movie and watch that, which I think could be very helpful for someone getting into the series and not knowing where to start. Also, I think that a lot of the information here is just generally basic, but there is still some information that a seasoned Godzilla fan like myself can definitely enjoy. And for some reason, there's nudity in this book. Yeah, for some reason they decided to include Katsura's titties, which were just, out in the movie, which I get, hey, if you're going to make an encyclopedia, you got to go kind of in depth. But, at the end of the day, I know a lot of kids are going to be picking this book up, so I just have to ask, what were they thinking? I remember back when I was a kid, I loved these encyclopedia books that were for Lego products, and I love all the information that they included, but they felt very repetitive. This book thankfully doesn't really feel that way. Again, the blurbs from the author add a lot to the book and it makes it feel fresh. The illustrations of the author in, costumes that are appropriate to the film, I find to be very interesting and just very cute in general. I guess you could say the aesthetics of this entire book are just very cute. It borders on being realistic at times, but for the most part, these are just very cute drawings to look at. Now, what if you are a Godzilla fan that is more seasoned? You know the monsters and would rather focus more on the actual films themselves and the filmmaking, the cinematography, and just what they mean in general. Well, I would recommend this book to you, Godzilla, the official guide to the King of the Monsters. This goes extremely in-depth on the filmmaking of Godzilla. It talks about each and every era, again, kind of breezing over the MonsterVerse stuff, but we'll get to it. It shows very compelling behind-the-scenes stills that I myself haven't even seen until I bought this book. And for me, this has been a great resource for all of my Godzilla retrospectives on this channel. The amount of detail that it goes into is honestly just incredible. I love paging through this and just looking at the pictures, but the words included in this book are also just fantastic. That sounds like a fucking caveman just reviewed this book. Words good, pictures good. But okay, I promise, it is a very well done encyclopedia on Godzilla, but more on the films. Again, if you're more of a seasoned Godzilla fan, you're not really interested in the monsters and their abilities, then this is the book for you. This is somewhat related, but this picture is just so weird to me. Seeing Godzilla behind a green screen just looks so off. I'm so used to seeing him behind miniatures, and so to see him in front of a green screen is just so weird to me. Looking beyond just the movies itself, it also talks about the video games, the comics, and TV shows as well. Mind you, I do have to preface this because I know a lot of people are going to be disappointed by it. It really doesn't talk about the MonsterVerse much. It gives it maybe a page each, whereas the Japanese movies get several pages to themselves. So don't be too disappointed by that. Again, this is a book that I believe was made by Toho, so it makes total sense that they would sort of breeze over the American ones, but talk in depth about the ones that they actually made. Getting a bit more personal here, this is what I consider to be my Godzilla encyclopedia growing up. I would read this non-stop. It's an issue of Famous Monsters of Filmland that came out in 2014, right before the Gareth Edwards movie came out. There is a surprising amount of valuable information in here, especially for a younger Godzilla fan at the time. It compiled all the movies into one consecutive book, and for me, this was just my definitive Godzilla encyclopedia. It is jam-packed with some really interesting editorials about each Godzilla movie, and that's actually what inspired me to make my retrospectives here on the channel. Now, something that's kind of funny, in case you couldn't tell, this magazine is beat to shit. I mean, I would carry this thing around with me everywhere I went, and I even took it to G-Fest with me, and I had people that were artists or authors in the Godzilla world sign it for me. So, for example, August Ragone, who wrote this incredible Eiji Tsuburaya book, signed it for me, as well as Chris Mowry, who's an artist that worked with the IDW Godzilla comic books. Ironically enough, Chris Mowry's work was not in this, but August Ragone actually wrote a little preamble for this specific book. And so it was really cool meeting them at G-Fest years and years ago. And so to use this book as kind of like an autograph book was kind of funny, if I'm being honest. Little kid me just thought, hey, this is my definitive Godzilla book, so I'll just have them sign it. There's some really weird things in this book that always kind of creep me out. For example, there's this advertisement for the Warner Archive for the movie Trog, which I remember seeing this specific still as a kid and being terrified by it. I thought it was some like weird half kid, half gorilla monster that was going around killing kids. And it turns out that's not at all what the movie is. It's just some Neanderthal guy going around killing people. And the movie's not that good, if I'm being honest. However, this terrified me, and it got me to watch Trog. So there's that. Half the movies shown on here aren't even that good. Like, From Hell It Came is just a downright terrible movie. So seeing this as a kid, I thought, oh wow, there are some really awesome horror movies out there that I should go watch. And in a way, this advertisement kind of broadened my horizons and got me to look at movies that weren't just Godzilla, that weren't just your typical horror movies like Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Universal Monsters. Now, around this time, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla movie still hadn't come out yet. The MonsterVerse wasn't really a thing. And so there was a lot of hype around this movie because no one really knew what to expect, myself included. So I mainly bought this for this specific page right here, where it went in depth in an interview with Gareth Edwards. Again, this was a huge resource for me for my Godzilla retrospective for the 2014 film. And we get a lot of insight into the design philosophy behind Godzilla in that specific movie. Gareth Edwards talks about how when they were designing it, they wanted it to appear as if this was what the Japanese filmmakers saw in the 50s. That caused them to make the Godzilla 54 movie. They wanted this to be true to the Japanese designs and to feel like something that Toho would have made if they had the technology. There's also this really great page where it goes over the best Godzilla pieces of merchandise ever. And as a kid, I just remember fawning over this page and wanting to collect all of them. I might actually make a video sometime in the future talking about the most expensive Godzilla figures in existence, and I guess just my general wish list, because this page right here was just something I fawned over as a kid. I loved looking at this. I think I do own a few of these, though, which is kind of cool. This page right here freaked me out. I saw this illustration of this like grotesque zombie, and I remember just being horrified by it. But weirdly, I loved it at the same time. This was also my introduction to Attack on Titan, a series that I hope to talk about more of in the future. And really, this was just really neat just flipping through it at the time as a kid and reading about it. There's also this book, which was like a Western sort of like cowboys versus werewolves type of novel that I always wanted to read, and I hope to read it sometime soon because I thought the teaser image was super freaky to look at. There's also tons of advertisements in here, like Buck Rogers and your general monster fanfare for the time. While we're on the topic of Godzilla magazines that I loved as a kid, this is my copy of Life magazine's Godzilla print. I don't really remember when this came out. I feel like it was also 2014, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And this one goes very, very in-depth about the history behind Godzilla. It talks about some of the movies, but mainly it's about the historical significance of the Big G and how it has influences from King Kong to the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and how without those movies we wouldn't have had Godzilla. It talks about Japan at the time and how World War II had affected them as a country. And for me, reading this as a kid, as a history nut, I loved this aspect of Godzilla, and I thought it was just really fascinating. My only real gripe is that it slams certain things together. For example, it just combines the Showa era and the Heisei era into one big sort of blob. So it goes from like the more goofier stuff to just, oh, by the way, they made movies in the 80s. And you don't really get that full grasp of the franchise, and it's kind of out of order too. But regardless, you know, it is what it is. If you have the famous Monsters of Filmland, like I did at the time, then to me that was like the perfect sort of like companion piece, because this talked more about the history and the real life stuff as opposed to the movies themselves, going movie by movie. It also talked in detail about the Roland Emmerich movie, which I think is really funny, especially when you consider that the Japanese books barely talked about the American stuff, but yet the American publications barely talk about the Japanese stuff, but go in depth on all of the American movies, which is just really funny to me. It also has a little mention of John Belushi playing Godzilla in an SNL skit, which I've already talked about in videos of my own, where some of it's lost media, but that's a topic for another day. Regardless, these were sort of my picks for the best Godzilla books to read. If you're a Godzilla fan, if you're a new Godzilla fan, if you're a seasoned Godzilla fan, and also just a little trip down memory lane for me, because these were magazines that I read to death. I mean, just look at some of the just look at the quality of some of these. It's honestly like I beat these to shit. And with all that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.